By 9:13 a.m. today, this entire town will be on fire. The smoke rising over the docks of Texas City, Texas, that strange, beautiful orange-yellow smoke that has every kid skipping school to come look, is about to become the largest non-nuclear explosion in American history. 2,300 tons of ammonium nitrate are sitting in the cargo hold of a French Liberty ship called the Grandcamp. The captain has just ordered his crew to seal the hatches and pump in steam, hoping to smother the fire without ruining the fertilizer underneath. He does not know that ammonium nitrate is an oxidizer. He does not know that steam is going to make this worse. In 9 minutes, that ship will disintegrate. A 2-ton anchor will fly through the air and land in a parking lot a mile and a half away. A 15-foot tidal wave will sweep across the docks. 2 airplanes flying overhead will be knocked out of the sky. Seismographs in Denver, Colorado, 1,600 kilometers away, will register an earthquake. By the time the second ship explodes 16 hours later, at least 581 Americans will be dead. The entire volunteer fire department of Texas City, 27 of 28 men, will be erased in a single second. 63 bodies will never be identified. They will be buried together in a mass grave with no names on the stones. This is the Texas City disaster of 1947, the deadliest industrial accident in United States history. A disaster caused by federal government chemicals, federal government negligence, and a federal government that, when 8,485 surviving Americans sued for justice, won in the United States Supreme Court by arguing it had the right to its own discretion. No one went to prison. No one paid a court-ordered dollar. And then, on April 17, 2013, 66 years and 1 day later, a fertilizer plant in West Texas exploded with the same chemical and killed 15 more Americans, including 12 volunteer firefighters. I am Leonard. This is DarkCon. Today we rebuild Texas City, the disaster Washington made happen and then walked away from. To understand what happened on April 16, 1947, you have to understand what World War II had just done to America's chemical industry. For 4 years, the United States had been the arsenal of democracy. Government plants in Nebraska, Iowa, and across the Midwest had churned out millions of tons of ammonium nitrate, the oxidizer at the heart of military explosives. Bombs, artillery shells, demolition charges, naval mines. The white powder that powered the American war effort across 2 oceans. Then the war ended. And suddenly, the United States government was sitting on warehouses full of ammonium nitrate with nothing to blow up. So Washington did what Washington always does. It found a market. Europe was starving. Farms across France, Germany, the Netherlands, Belgium had been bombed flat. The Marshall Plan was about to begin. American grain was already crossing the Atlantic. But you cannot grow food without fertilizer. And ammonium nitrate, mixed with clay and a little wax to keep it from caking, makes excellent fertilizer. The chemical that had been blowing up Berlin in 1944 was about to be sent to feed Berlin in 1947. There was just one problem. Nobody told the people who were going to handle it that it was still the same explosive. The Port of Houston refused to load ammonium nitrate. Houston's Port Authority had read the chemistry reports. They knew. They said no. So the cargo went 30 miles south to a smaller port that was not so picky. A port owned by a private terminal railway company. A port that was hungry for post-war business. The Port of Texas City said yes. Texas City in 1947 was a Gulf Coast boomtown of 16,000 people. Mostly workers, mostly poor. Refineries, chemical plants, tank farms. The Monsanto Chemical Company employed 450 people in shifts at a plant right on the water. Republic Oil, Union Carbide, Sid Richardson Oil, Pan American Refining. The grain elevator on the docks, the C-train loading crane. The volunteer fire department had 4 trucks and 28 men, every one of them a working stiff with a day job. A railway clerk, a refinery worker, a longshoreman, who showed up when the bell rang. The fire chief was a man named Henry Baumgartner, longtime employee of the Texas City Terminal Railway, the very company that owned the docks. He had been chief of the volunteer department for years. He knew every man on the trucks by his first name. By April 14, 1947, longshoremen had begun loading sacks of ammonium nitrate fertilizer into the holds of a French Liberty ship called the Grandcamp. The ship had been built in California in 1942 as the SS Benjamin R. Curtis, served in the Pacific Theater, mothballed in Philadelphia after VJ Day, and then handed to France as part of America's effort to put Europe back on its feet. The French rechristened her Grandcamp. Her cargo on April 16th, 2,300 tons of ammonium nitrate fertilizer, plus tobacco, peanuts, sisal twine for ropes, and, for reasons that have never been adequately explained, government-owned small arms ammunition. Loading was paused on the evening of April 15th because of rain. 600 more tons were scheduled to be loaded the next morning. Wednesday, April 16th, 1947, 8 a.m., longshoremen go down into hold number 4, where most of the fertilizer is stored, and one of them smells smoke. Then he sees it, curling up between the burlap sacks. The men try a gallon jug of drinking water. They try 2 fire extinguishers. None of it works. The hold is filling up with smoke faster than they can do anything about it. The captain is a Frenchman named Charles de Guillebon. He has a problem. The fertilizer in his hold is going to France to feed people who are eating ration cards for breakfast. If he soaks it with seawater, it turns into a brown sludge that nobody can plant. The cargo is worth a lot of money. The contract is with the French government. So Captain de Guillebon makes the decision that will kill more than 500 Americans. He orders the longshoremen out of the hold. He orders the hatches sealed. And he orders the ship's steam suppression system turned on, pumping high-pressure steam into the burning cargo to smother the flames. Steam is fine if you are putting out a kitchen fire. Ammonium nitrate is an oxidizer. It carries its own oxygen. You cannot smother an oxidizer. You can only heat it, and the steam is heating it. 8:30 a.m. The pressure inside Hold 4 blows the hatch covers off the ship. A column of smoke shoots straight up into the morning sky, and it is not black or white or gray. It is orange. It is yellow. It is glowing. That color is nitrogen dioxide gas, a sign that the fertilizer below decks is no longer just smoldering. It is breaking down chemically. The orange smoke is what an ammonium nitrate fire looks like in the seconds before it stops being a fire and becomes something else. But nobody on the ground in Texas City knows that. What they know is that there is a beautiful golden glowing pillar of smoke rising over the docks against a clear blue Texas sky. And human beings, when something looks beautiful, want to come see. The schools of Texas City in 1947 were so overcrowded after the wartime population boom that students went in 2 shifts, morning and afternoon, which means at 8:45 a.m. on April 16th, every kid scheduled for the afternoon shift was free. Word spreads through town fast. Come see the pretty smoke. Come down to the docks. The fire trucks are there. 500 people start walking toward the harbor. Mothers with babies in their arms, school children on bikes, old men who have nothing better to do. They line the shoreline at what they think is a safe distance, a few hundred feet from where the Grandcamp is moored. Closer in, 27 of the 28 Texas City volunteer firemen, led by Chief Henry Baumgartner, have rolled all 4 of their trucks down to the dock. They are running hose lines. They are spraying water onto the deck of the burning ship. The water vaporizes before it lands. The deck is hot enough to boil it. A man named Bob Sutherland, the safety engineer for the Monsanto plant across the slip, has rolled out his company's fire crew with a 500-gallon pumper. He is also Monsanto's volunteer fire chief. He laid hose lines from a hydrant in a Monsanto yard between 2 large brick and steel buildings, about 2 city blocks from the Grandcamp. Bob Sutherland is doing something the Texas City firemen are not doing. He is yelling at the spectators, "Get back! Get away from the docks! Move! Now!" He is trying to clear the crowd. 9:12 a.m. 2,300 tons of ammonium nitrate detonate in the hold of the SS Grandcamp. The shockwave moves outward at the speed of sound. In the first 300 feet, every human being is vaporized. The bodies of the 27 Texas City firemen on the dock, gone. The bodies of Captain de Guillebon's crew still on board, gone. Most of the 500 spectators along the shoreline, gone. Bob Sutherland, who was running toward the crowd to push them further back, is killed instantly. The two large brick and steel buildings that flanked his pumper truck are no longer there. The pumper truck itself is picked up and thrown 200 feet through the air. The 2-ton anchor of the Grandcamp is launched into the sky and lands a mile and a half away in a parking lot. Pieces of the ship, some weighing several tons, rain down across Texas City for the next 60 seconds. 2 propeller airplanes flying overhead are knocked out of the sky by the shockwave. Both pilots die. A 15-foot tidal wave, pushed up out of Galveston Bay by the displacement of the blast, crashes across the docks and sweeps a 4,000-ton steel barge 200 feet inland, carrying dead and injured bodies into the turning basin as it recedes. The Monsanto chemical plant, across the slip, 1 football field from the Grandcamp, is flattened in a single second. Of the 450 workers on shift, 145 die instantly. Fragments of red-hot steel from the ship rain down into nearby oil refineries and ignite their storage tanks. Those fires will burn for the next 6 days. Glass shatters in Galveston, 10 miles away. People walking on sidewalks in Galveston are thrown to the pavement. Buildings sway in Baytown, 25 miles north. Plate glass shatters in Port Arthur, 90 miles away. In Denver, Colorado, 1,600 kilometers from Texas City, the seismograph at the United States Geological Survey records an earthquake. Most American disasters take time to unfold. Texas City took 6 seconds. In the first 6 seconds, 27 of 28 volunteer firemen dead. 145 Monsanto workers dead. Hundreds of spectators dead. Every fire truck in the city destroyed. The city's only operating hospital gone. The city's electrical grid down. The city's water supply broken. Texas City has just lost the means to save itself. And 600 feet across the slip, another Liberty ship, the SS High Flyer, is on fire. The High Flyer was loaded with 1,000 tons of ammonium nitrate and 2,000 tons of sulfur, a chemistry combination even more volatile than the Grandcamp's pure fertilizer. The blast from the Grandcamp had broken her mooring lines and pushed her against another ship called the Wilson B. Keene. Now both vessels were drifting in the slip, with smoke pouring from the High Flyer's holds. For the next 16 hours, civilian volunteers, U.S. Coast Guard tugboats, and exhausted refinery firemen tried to tow the High Flyer out into Galveston Bay before she went up. They failed. The mooring lines were tangled in the Wilson B. Keene. The tugboats could not get a clean pull. The thick black sulfur smoke drifting across the waterfront forced one rescue crew after another to abandon the effort. At 1:10 a.m. on April 17, 1947, 16 hours after the Grandcamp, the High Flyer detonated. The second blast was nearly as large as the first. It blew the bow off the Wilson B. Keene. It set fire to even more oil tanks. It threw shrapnel another mile across the burning ruins of Texas City. 19 volunteer firefighters were never seen again, leaving relatives to wait for word that would never come. By dawn on April 17th, an American port town that had been a thriving Gulf Coast boom city 24 hours earlier was a smoking, oil-soaked, body-strewn crater. The death toll. The official number, carved on the anchor monument in Texas City Memorial Park, is 576 known dead, of which 398 were identified and 178 were missing without a body to bury. Most modern historians, including the United States Fire Administration, place the real death toll at 581. But here is what the official numbers do not include. Foreign sailors on visiting ships in the harbor, uncounted. Undocumented Mexican laborers who were working the docks that morning, uncounted. Itinerant longshoremen who had no payroll record, uncounted. The records of the Monsanto chemical company, destroyed in the blast that killed their workers. Some historians who have looked at the gaps put the real death toll at 650. Some put it higher. 5,000 people were injured. 1,784 were admitted to hospitals as far away as Houston and Galveston. More than 800 children were left orphans or half-orphans. 2,000 citizens lost their homes. More than 1,000 residences and business buildings were destroyed or seriously damaged. 362 railway freight cars and 1,100 motor vehicles were wrecked. 63 bodies were so badly damaged that the FBI, even with fingerprint records, could not identify them. On June 22, 1947, those 63 caskets were buried together in a single ceremony at a cemetery near Moses Lake, just north of Texas City. 63 hearses, supplied by 51 funeral homes from 28 different cities, drove in procession. The line of cars stretched a mile and a half on both sides of the highway. The pallbearers were members of the American Legion, the VFW, labor unions, and surviving volunteer firemen. The crowd was estimated at 5,000. Each casket was decorated with flowers donated by florists across Texas. None of them had a name. When the smoke cleared, Americans wanted to know who was responsible. The ammonium nitrate had been manufactured at federal government ordnance plants. It had been packaged in burlap bags using a proprietary government formula. It had been shipped by federal government contracts to a port owned by a private railway company. It had been loaded onto a ship that was rented from the federal government to the French government. The Coast Guard, which was supposed to enforce dangerous cargo regulations, had not enforced its own rules at the port of Texas City. The Interstate Commerce Commission had no rules in place for transporting fertilizer-grade ammonium nitrate by rail. The Army Ordnance Department had not warned anyone in Texas that the chemical it was selling for fertilizer was the same chemical it had been using to blow up tanks. So the survivors did something that had never been done in American history before. In 1946, just 1 year before the disaster, Congress had passed the Federal Tort Claims Act. For the first time in 2 centuries, ordinary citizens could sue the United States government for damages caused by federal negligence. 8,485 Texas City survivors and family members filed suit. The lead plaintiff was a widow named Elizabeth Dalehite, whose husband Henry had been killed in the explosion. The case was called Dalehite et al. Versus United States. It was the first class action lawsuit against the federal government in American history. On April 13, 1950, the Federal District Court ruled. The judge spent 43 pages laying out exactly what the United States government had done wrong. He named 168 federal agencies and individual officials. He cited negligent acts in the manufacture, packaging, and labeling of ammonium nitrate. He cited negligent acts in transport, storage, loading, fire prevention, and fire suppression. He found the United States government legally responsible for the deaths of 581 Americans. It was the highest-profile victory against the federal government in the history of the Federal Tort Claims Act. Justice, finally, for Texas City. It lasted 2 years. On June 10, 1952, the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals overturned the district court ruling. The reasoning was, and I quote the court's own words, "The United States government has the right to exercise its own, quote, discretion, end quote, in matters of vital national importance." The judges said, shipping fertilizer to rebuild Europe was a matter of national policy. National policy is not subject to negligence claims. Therefore, the government cannot be sued. The case went to the United States Supreme Court. On June 8, 1953, the Supreme Court, by a vote of 4-3, affirmed the appeals court. The federal government was not liable. 8,485 plaintiffs received nothing. Elizabeth Dalehite, who had buried her husband in pieces, received nothing. The 800 orphans received nothing. In 1955, after 2 more years of public outrage, Congress passed Public Law 378, a special appropriation that paid out a small settlement to surviving claimants. The average payment per victim, after adjustment for inflation in today's dollars, came to about $14,000. For a dead spouse, for a dead child, for a face that disappeared in a fireball at 9:12 in the morning. What about the rules? The Texas City disaster did finally force changes. New federal regulations required ammonium nitrate to be shipped at controlled temperatures. New rules prohibited storing it near sulfur, oil, or other reactive materials. New rules limited overseas shipment in bulk. The Industrial Mutual Aid System, developed in the wake of Texas City, became the model for industrial disaster response across the country. The Texas City Volunteer Fire Department was rebuilt, first as a combination department, then in 1956 as a fully paid municipal fire department, the first in the region. These were real reforms. They saved lives, but they did not address the fundamental question that Texas City raised and that the Supreme Court refused to answer. When a federal agency makes a decision that gets ordinary Americans killed, who is accountable? April 17, 2013, 66 years and 1 day after Texas City. A small town called West in McLennan County, Texas, 90 minutes north of Waco. Population 2,800. A farming community, mostly Czech American, mostly Catholic, with a beautiful old church, 2 schools, and a nursing home. On the north edge of town, on land that had been open fields when the plant was built in 1962, sits the West Fertilizer Company. The town has grown out toward it over the last 50 years. There is now a middle school 900 feet away, a high school across the road, a nursing home half a mile down the street, an apartment complex right next door. The plant stores fertilizer-grade ammonium nitrate in wooden bins, with no fire sprinklers. In 2006, complaints of an ammonia smell led Texas environmental regulators to inspect the facility. They found violations. The EPA fined the company for not having a risk management plan. The next year, the company filed an updated plan that did not even mention the ammonium nitrate stored on site. The Occupational Safety and Health Administration had not inspected the plant since 1985. At 7:29 p.m., on April 17, 2013, a fire is reported at the West Fertilizer Company. The West Volunteer Fire Department rolls up. 12 firefighters and 3 civilians who came to help, 15 Americans, are at the plant when the fire reaches the ammonium nitrate bins. At 7:51 p.m., 22 minutes after the alarm, 28 to 34 tons of ammonium nitrate detonate with the force of 7.5 tons of TNT. The explosion leaves a crater 93 feet across and 12 feet deep. It registers as an earthquake on USGS sensors. It destroys 150 buildings, including both schools, the nursing home, and an apartment complex. If it had happened during the school day, the casualty count would have been catastrophic. The Chemical Safety Board concluded that, and I quote their report, the casualty count would have included a significant number of children. 15 Americans die. 12 of them are volunteer firefighters. The investigation that followed produced the United States Chemical Safety Board's final report in January 2016. The board's chair told reporters something that should have been national news. In 2001, 12 years before West, the CSB had recommended adding ammonium nitrate to the EPA's Risk Management Program list, the federal regulation that requires hazardous chemical facilities to file safety plans and submit to inspections. The EPA had refused. In 2002, 11 years before West, the CSB had recommended it again. The EPA had refused. When asked under oath at a 2013 Senate hearing Why the EPA had not added ammonium nitrate to the regulated list. EPA Deputy Administrator Barry Breen told the committee that the recommendation would be, quote, an inadequate approach. He could not, when pressed, explain why. 2013. The same chemical, the same rural town pattern, the same volunteer firefighters running toward the smoke, the same dead. In Texas, today, in 2026, there are still 40 active facilities that store fertilizer-grade ammonium nitrate. According to the Chemical Safety Board's 2016 report, 33 of those facilities are within half a mile of homes, schools, hospitals, or nursing homes. The state of Texas in 2014 began allowing the Texas Attorney General's office to deny open records requests for the locations of ammonium nitrate facilities on the grounds of Homeland Security. The public is not allowed to know where the next West Texas is going to be. In 2024, the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality approved permits for 2 new ammonium nitrate fertilizer manufacturing plants. Their location? Texas City, Texas. The same dock area, the same Galveston Bay, the same town where the anchor of the Grandcamp still stands as a monument. The Texas City Memorial today is a quiet place. In Memorial Park, near the docks, there is a small section of grass with 63 flat stone markers. Each marker says nothing more than a date, April 16, 1947, and a number. These are the unidentified. Body number 12, body number 37, body number 49. Some of these were children. We know they were children because of the size of what was buried. We do not know their names. We do not know who their mothers were. We do not know if anyone is still looking for them. A few hundred yards away stands the 2-ton anchor of the SS Grandcamp, recovered from the parking lot where it landed in 1947, mounted on a stone pedestal. There is also a small marble angel, the Firefighters Memorial, listing the 27 volunteer firemen of the Texas City Volunteer Fire Department who died on April 16, 1947. 27 names: Henry Baumgartner, Frank Adams, Wilson Andrew, Bob Sutherland of Monsanto. The names of working-class men who walked toward the smoke because that was their job, while the orange smoke grew over the harbor, while the children watched from their bicycles, while the captain of the Grandcamp was taking attendance on the pier, while 581 Americans had 9 minutes left to live. The lesson of Texas City was simple. When the federal government manufactures a chemical for war, then sells it as fertilizer to ordinary Americans without telling them what they are handling, ordinary Americans die. When the courts let the government walk away from that responsibility because of discretion in matters of national importance, the lesson reaches the next generation. Cut corners, skip inspections, build storage facilities out of wood, put schools 900 feet away, approve new plants in the same harbor where 581 people were vaporized. The United States Supreme Court told 8,485 plaintiffs that no one was responsible for Texas City. 66 years later, no one was responsible for West. In 2026, no one will be responsible for the next one. Elizabeth Dalehite, the widow who put her name on the largest class action lawsuit in American history, lived another 40 years after the disaster. She remarried. She raised her children. She died in 1989 in Texas City at the age of 81. She is buried in Memorial Park, a few rows from the unidentified 63. She never received a court-ordered dollar from the United States government. The settlement Congress passed in 1955 paid her family a few $1,000s. She used the money for her children's education. When her grandchildren asked her, late in life, about the husband she had lost, she would tell them the same thing every time. She would tell them his name. She would tell them what time he had left for work that morning. And she would tell them, someone is supposed to be in charge. Someone is supposed to be paying attention. Someone is supposed to know what is in the bag. In Texas City today, the Galveston Bay is calm. The refineries still operate. The Texas City Terminal Railway still runs trains. The anchor of the Grandcamp still sits on its pedestal in Memorial Park. The volunteer fire department was rebuilt, first as a combination department, then in 1956 as a fully paid municipal fire department. The new department has 3 stations and 62 career firefighters. They train for industrial chemical incidents every month. The industrial mutual aid system lets them call for help from a dozen surrounding refineries within minutes. The new ammonium nitrate plants approved by the state in 2024 are scheduled to begin operation in 2027. They will be loaded by trucks. The fertilizer they ship will be sent to American farms in Iowa, Nebraska, Kansas, and the Texas Panhandle. The plants will store it in modern fireproof bins with sprinklers, most of the time. When the inspectors come, most of the time. 581 Americans died on April 16th and 17th, 1947 in Texas City, Texas. 63 of them are buried in a row of stones with no names. 800 children were left without a mother or father. 8,485 plaintiffs sued the United States government. They lost in the Supreme Court 4-3. In 2026, no executive has ever served a day in jail for an industrial chemical disaster on American soil. Remember them. The 27 volunteer firemen who walked toward the smoke. The 145 Monsanto workers who showed up for their shift. The 500 spectators along the shoreline who came to see the pretty smoke. The 63 with no names. The 15 at West Texas in 2013. And the ones whose names we will be carving into stone somewhere in this country by the end of this decade. I am Leonard. This is DarkCon. I find forgotten disasters. I rebuild them with AI. You watch. You remember. Subscribe. They survived so you wouldn't forget.